Her teeth were black, her breath foul, her skin rotting beneath a crust of white powder. This was the face of one of history's most celebrated monarchs, Queen Elizabeth I. To the world, she was England's divine virgin, cloaked in pearls, cloaked in power. But the closer you looked, the more the illusion dissolved. Beneath the silk gowns and silver crowns hid a woman terrified of being seen, truly seen. She did not bathe. She avoided mirrors. Her smile decayed in silence. Every ritual, every fragrance, every powdered touch served a single purpose: to protect the myth from the rot underneath. This wasn't ignorance. It was strategy. In a time when medicine feared water and beauty was pain, Elizabeth turned filth into theater. Her hygiene habits weren't personal, they were political. They held her kingdom together even as her body unraveled in secret. Today we uncover 5 of the most disturbing, calculated, and symbolic hygiene practices of Queen Elizabeth I. Not to shame her, but to understand the price of power when image becomes more important than flesh. What we reveal isn't just history, it's haunting. Habit number 1, the ritual of avoiding baths to bathe was to invite danger. In Elizabeth's world, water wasn't purity, it was risk. Doctors of the time believed that warm baths opened the pores to disease, let bad air seep into the blood, and disrupted the body's humors. Cleanliness had nothing to do with soap or steam. It was something else entirely, something ritual, something symbolic. Queen Elizabeth I famously declared she bathed only once a month, whether I need it or not. The phrase may be apocryphal, but the mindset was real. Full immersion required wooden tubs, buckets of heated water, and an army of servants. It wasn't casual, it was ceremonial. And for Elizabeth, ceremony was only for the throne. Instead of water, she turned to linen. Her undergarments, known as shifts, were changed constantly. Twice a day, sometimes more. These fine cloths were believed to draw out toxins through contact alone. Her attendants treated them like cleansing agents, not clothing. A new shift meant a new layer of purification. Dirt wasn't scrubbed, it was absorbed and removed. Scents became substitutes for washing. Rosewater, vinegar, and tinctures of herbs were applied to her neck, wrists, and behind her ears. Her apothecaries crafted elaborate blends of lavender, rosemary, and orris root to keep her fresh. But freshness was an illusion. Her skin may have glowed, but the truth sat just beneath it, unwashed, untouched. Bathing, in its most literal sense, risked revealing the body. And Elizabeth's body was not hers alone, it was England's. To disrobe was to become mortal. To soak was to let down her guard. So she wrapped herself in layers of linen and lavender, presenting not a queen in flesh, but a sovereign wrapped in vapor. Habit number 2, the sweet rot in Elizabethan England. Sugar was not a treat, it was treasure. Imported at high cost, stored in locked cabinets, measured like gold. To possess, it was to wield status, and Queen Elizabeth I wielded it like a weapon. She adored sugar in every form. Candied violets, rose petal preserves, marzipan sculpted into mythical beasts. It wasn't indulgence. It was a message. England was wealthy, and so was she. But beneath the royal banquet table, something was quietly rotting. The Queen's obsession didn't stop at desserts. She used sugar even on her teeth, scrubbing them with pastes sweetened with herbs and honey. In theory, it cleansed. In practice, it corroded. With tear eyebrows, the use of southern sugar in crowns where her once celebrated smile began to blacken. Tooth by tooth, it decayed. Courtiers whispered. Ambassadors wrote home disturbed. Some said her breath made conversation unbearable. Others noted her speech had become slurred, impeded by the growing gaps in her mouth. But the Queen refused to acknowledge it. When physicians recommended extractions, she rejected them outright. In one case, a courtier reportedly had his own tooth pulled in front of her just to prove it was survivable. Still, she declined, not out of vanity, but out of fear. A bloodied face was not a royal image. Pain could not be shown. Decay, it seemed, would have to be endured in silence. And yet, the strangest twist wasn't her refusal to treat it, it was what followed. Noble women, in their devotion, began staining their own teeth dark to match hers. Soot, charcoal, crushed clove, they painted on decay like it was divine. Rot had become fashionable. In the Queen's court, imitation was power. Even disease became desirable if it mirrored the monarch. This wasn't about hygiene, it was about hierarchy. Her teeth weren't just failing, they were being followed. To the untrained eye, she looked immaculate, clean even. But cleanliness in her case was a performance. Every fragrance, every fold of cloth was part of the theater. Water might have revealed the woman, but illusion preserved the crown. Habit number 3, the mask that ate her face. Her face was a national artifact, porcelain, cold, and impossibly smooth. But it wasn't skin, it was war paint. In an age obsessed with pale complexions as signs of purity and nobility, she took the ideal to its most lethal extreme. Her weapon of choice was Venetian ceruse, a mixture of white lead and vinegar. The effect was immediate, a ghostly radiance that erased every blemish, every shadow, every sign of humanity. It poisoned. It scarred. Over time, the Queen developed lesions and sores, which only invited more makeup. And so the cycle deepened. Damage, cover, damage again. Lip color offered no salvation. She favored vermilion, made from cinnabar, a mercury-rich pigment. It gave her a brilliant red smile, but introduced another toxin into her bloodstream. Historians believe it affected her nervous system, worsened her moods, and may have contributed to tremors or mental decline in her final years. But she never stopped. To appear without her face was unthinkable. She banned natural light in her sittings. Artists weren't allowed to paint her as she was. They had to copy from ideal templates, ignoring the reality beneath. She refused mirrors in her chambers. It's said that even her closest attendants rarely saw her unpainted. The Queen's face wasn't her own. It belonged to her legend. In her later years, the makeup became a mask in the literal sense, so thick it cracked. Some whispered that touching it could cause it to crumble, but still she painted, still she performed. This wasn't vanity. This was domination. Her beauty wasn't for admiration, it was a wall. It kept enemies distant, lovers guessing, and time itself frozen in place. Her face, eaten away by poison, became the final battlefield. And she chose to lose the body if it meant winning the illusion, because in Elizabeth's court, appearance wasn't decoration, it was doctrine. Habit number 4. The throne beneath the golden canopies and velvet cushions of Elizabeth's court lay a secret more foul than treason. There were no toilets, no plumbing, no elegant escape from the most basic of human needs. And yet, Queen Elizabeth I still had to relieve herself, just not like commoners. Her royal chamber contained what was called a close stool, an ornate cushioned chair with a discreet hole in the center. Beneath it sat a ceramic pot, and beneath that, nothing but silence and a smell no crown could mask. But this wasn't left to anonymous servants. No. The Queen entrusted this task to one of the highest-ranking men in court, the groom of the stool. His job? To manage her bodily functions with dignity. He cleaned the pot, he scented the room, he stayed nearby at all times, and in doing so he gained unmatched access to the Queen, physically and politically. His role, though rooted in filth, came with incredible influence. He attended private conversations, reviewed sensitive documents, and often knew more than her ministers. Outside her chambers, however, things were far worse. The palace relied on chamber pots and cesspits, stone-lined holes where waste collected and festered. Servants known as gong farmers removed it by night, carrying the stench on their backs. These pits overflowed. Some were built beneath rooms. The air reeked. Incense burned not for prayer, but for cover. Herbal strewing, scattering rosemary, lavender, and mint across the floor was common practice. But these herbs absorbed more than fragrance. Beneath the rushes lay years of decay, food scraps, hair, dust, filth compressed into the floorboards of power. Even Elizabeth's movements were strategic. She frequently traveled between palaces, not only to maintain her image or evade plots, but to escape the unbearable buildup of waste. Cleanliness, again, wasn't about sanitation. It was about preservation. The illusion of refinement had to move faster than the smell of truth. Because even in a palace, rot rises, and even a queen sits on a throne built over it. Habit number 5, the perfumed fortress. Elizabeth didn't smell like sweat or soap. She smelled like power. Her scent, layered, deliberate, and intoxicating, was not for pleasure, but protection. In a world without plumbing and a queen without bathing, perfume became her fortress. Each morning she was surrounded by fragrant rituals. Attendants dabbed her wrists, neck, and bodice with custom blends: rosewater steeped in cloves, lavender mixed with orris root, vinegar tinctures spiced with cinnamon and sage. These were not store-bought luxuries. They were commissioned from her apothecaries, brewed in still rooms like potions of control. Every drop had a purpose: to mask what was decaying and to project what was divine. Elizabeth carried pomanders, small or like containers of pressed herbs and resins, tied to her waist or held in her hand. When the stench of court life overwhelmed her, she simply lifted one and inhaled. To outsiders, it looked graceful. In truth, it was defense, not from people, but from the reality of her own body. Her gloves were soaked in oils, her handkerchiefs embroidered and perfumed. Even her wigs, powdered and stiffened with sugar water, carried the scent of carefully chosen botanicals. She didn't clean her hair, she concealed it. And when the hair thinned or fell, she replaced it. Her image would not decay even if her body did. As she aged, these habits deepened. Mirrors disappeared from her private rooms. Portraits were tightly controlled. Only one version of Elizabeth could exist: the scented sovereign. She carried a perfumed walking stick, and when an advisor's odor became unbearable, she would raise it not out of disgust, but as performance. A quiet reminder she was not like them. In her world, fragrance was not just aroma. It was armor. It signaled distance, authority, and the untouchable. Soap washed away dirt. Perfume erased humanity. Because in Elizabeth's court, you didn't clean the body. You covered it in myth and made sure it never spoke. In Elizabeth's world, hygiene was not about health. It was about mythology. To clean was to reveal. To perfume was to protect. Every act of concealment was a declaration. I am not like you. I am more. And perhaps that's what makes her terrifyingly brilliant. She didn't just rule a kingdom, she ruled perception. She weaponized her own decay, transforming discomfort into divinity, turning rot into ritual. We often look to history for purity, for lessons, for virtue, but sometimes what we find are masks, flaking, painted masks, held together by ritual, rot, and fear. And in Elizabeth's case, the mask didn't fall. It won.